Hi everybody and welcome back to the channel. So today I'm going to be talking about incomes and professions within EVE. So this video would be more targeted at newer players that are wondering how much they can earn from taking specific routes within EVE and basically focusing on specific professions. Now this will be a rough idea. Some of these figures may be out a little, but again it will give you a rough idea of which way you may want to take your EVE career or training towards. So we're going to start off on mining, and that is because the vast majority of newer players when they start EVE do go down the mining route. Now the mining route is relatively straightforward, it's simple, but it doesn't pay a great deal, and that's because basically it's easy and simple and pretty much anybody can do it with minimal amount of skills. It generally has the lowest level of ISK making until you get to the higher levels, and that is generally because a lot of it can be done AFK, although it can be relatively dangerous. So straight off we're going to go for the Venture, and this is the only ship that can be used by a alpha account, and with half decent skills from an alpha you can expect to be pulling in around about 5 to 6 million ISK per hour. If you are an Omega account, then you have access to the mining barges. These will increase your income by roughly double, so you're looking around 10 to 15 million ISK per hour, and these can obviously carry more ore, can mine slightly quicker and have a few perks, but again these will take a little bit more skill level over the Venture. The Venture is really quick to get into, the mining barges take a little bit longer. After that you've got your Exhumers. Now these will mine slightly more, but not massive amounts more than the mining barge, and are much more susceptible to being ganked in high sec. So risk versus reward, it's generally not worth it. You're better off sticking with your mining barges. So those of you that want to invest more skill points into mining, then we have the bigger industrial ships. We have the Porpoise, and we've got the Orca. These I would say are medium to high level skill point ships, and will roughly net you around 30 to 35 million ISK an hour for an Orca. For the Porpoise I would say around about 25 million. Now we have the capital ship, the Roracle, which can only be used in low sec and 0-0, and with that ship high skills are required, and you can be pulling in roughly 100 to 150 million ISK an hour, and depending on if you are able to find a high level moon you can be pulling in quite a lot more than that as well. So mining does have a few pros and cons. The pros are you can add extra ships to your fleet, potentially either doubling, tripling, etc. the amount of ISK that you're pulling in for every extra ship that you have, and it is relatively easy to multitask with them. Another advantage of mining is that it can be done in groups, so therefore it can be quite a social activity. You can talk to people on comms, and generally it's relatively straightforward without a great deal of stress. So the downsides are it's very repetitive, it's incredibly boring. Now obviously some people do enjoy that kind of play style, but again it's not one I would generally recommend personally, but everybody to their own. As I said at the start as well, mining is one of the lowest amounts of ISK per hour that you can make in the game. So to recap, mining will make you 30 to 35 million excluding capital ships, with low to medium amount of skill points required. Now secondly we have missions. We're going to concentrate specifically on security missions, and this is the vast majority of the missions that people do. These can net you, well basically you have 5 levels, 1 to 5. Level 1, 2, 3, basically what you're trying to get to is level 4. Now you can get level 4 in high sec, level 5s can only be found in low sec, and generally you will need to be a member of a specific corp that owns the area in order to be able to do level 5s. So for the time being we're going to be basically just doing the level 1 to 4. Now you can do level 1s with starter ships basically, and then slowly train your character up until you can get into slightly bigger ships until level 4. Basically level 4 is where you're after. So level 4s will net you in the region of 80 million ISK per hour, including loyalty points that you will be able to sell and exchange for items which you can sell on the market. The missions are all generally recorded on the internet. You can find guides to do them all. They are very, very static. They don't change a great deal, become incredibly repetitive, but you know exactly what you get in each and every time you get in there. This makes them easy to farm with very little surprise and can net you a half decent amount of ISK for very little risk. So these can be run in a majority of ships, but for newer players, battleships are probably the way that you want to be going due to the fact that they have higher DPS, higher damage, repair, and generally easier to less micromanagement is required. So one of the pros for doing security agents is that you will be training up potentially skills that will be transferable to PvP in regards to obviously fitting your ship, weapons and the rest of it. So all the skills that you train up for running missions are easily transferable to PvP. And as already mentioned, one of the plus sides is that the missions are relatively static, so you know what you're getting, and that is also one of the downers, that basically the missions are static and become boring after a period of time. The ISK is obviously better than what you will get with mining, but again, you can't do much AFK in regards to missions, or you can, but basically I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. So, as I said, 60 to 80 million ISK is what you can expect once you've got your character trained up to a decent level and you know the missions inside out. Next we have the Abyss. The Abyss has 7 levels, 0 being the easiest, and gradual increments of difficulty all the way up to level 6. These can be done in frigates, destroyers or cruisers, and can be done in any level of space, so high sec, low sec, null sec or wormholes. Now while running the Abyss, the type of ship that you take will determine the amount of filaments and the amount of loot that you're going to take. So for instance, if you take a cruiser, you need 1 filament and you'll get standard loot. If you take a destroyer, you can potentially take up to 2 destroyers and you'll get 2 times the loot, but 2 times filaments will be required. If you do it in frigates, you can take potentially 3 frigates. You will need 3 times the filaments, but you will get 3 times the loot drops. So with the Abyss, there are 5 weather types. Each one has its own unique weather and pros and cons for doing that. Now, the thing that is slightly different with the Abyss is that for each site, you get 20 minutes. If you don't complete the site within 20 minutes, regardless, your ship will be destroyed. So you have to clear out the Abyss in order to be able to get out of the Abyss. If you don't manage to kill all the NPCs before your time is up, your pod and your ship will be destroyed. This can obviously add quite a level of risk, and it is something obviously to be very much aware of before taking a ship in there. So I'm going to reel off some averages here, and as I said, they are averages, so do keep that in mind. So for tier 0, if you are running a cruiser, you can be making up to 1 million ISK per run. If you are in a destroyer, you could be earning up to 1.6 million ISK a run, and if you are in a frigate, you can potentially be doing up to 2.4 million ISK per run. Next we have tier 1 sites. Now in a cruiser, the average income that you can be expecting is 3 million ISK. In a destroyer, it's 4.1 million ISK, and in frigates, it's 6 million ISK. For tier 2, for a cruiser, it's roughly 6 million ISK. For a destroyer, it's 9 million ISK. And for a frigate, it's 15 million ISK. Now, I'm not going to go through tiers 3 to 6, but basically for tier 3, in a cruiser, you can be roughly putting in 4 million ISK, and in a tier 4 site, you're looking at roughly 36 million ISK in a cruiser. Now, obviously, these can be done, especially the lower level ones, so the zeros and the level 1s can be done relatively swiftly with a half decent build and enough skill points. Now, again, these can be done in a multitude of ships from Punishers and Worms all the way through to assault ships, etc. So you can use a multiple range of ships in order to be able to do these. Some are better than others, and again, I would recommend checking out sites for specific fittings. For the lower levels, say the level 1s, you can be getting through a site within 10 minutes, making it the fact that you could do 6 an hour relatively easily with not a great deal of risk and can be making a decent amount of ISK. And you can also get freak random drops where you get one of the multi-plasmids, which can be worth in excess of 50 million ISK at a time. Again, it is very rare, but it does happen. Another plus for this as well is, again, you are training up skills which are transferable to PvP, ship loadouts, etc. So it is quite nicely transferable. The Abyss will have roughly a set amount of NPCs in each site, but these are potentially random NPCs and have a range of abilities. Some sites can be harder than others, some can be incredibly easy, some can be incredibly difficult. Some spawn battleship size enemies which can take you quite a long time to take down, so you will need a minimum amount of DPS. So I would recommend the site in-game Abyssal Lurkers. Here you can see a few fits. They also have a Discord, and obviously you can ask any questions in the actual channel itself. The general people here are relatively helpful and they will give you fits if you ask. So I think for this video we will leave it there. There are obviously more than that, but they are probably the three most popular at the moment. Again, ranging from each and every one has its benefits and downsides. I quite like running the Abyss. It's much more fun than missions. Does get you on your edge of your seat a little bit, and does have obviously benefits that there can be a decent amount of ISK to be made there, where missions can be relatively boring, but again quite consistent in pay, so you don't have the swings that you can have in the Abyss, and again you are less likely to be destroyed. So again, it is possible or potential that you may want to go missions and then over into abyssal sites. Mining, I don't like mining due to the fact that the skills are not transferable in regards to PvP, and I would imagine that long-term PvP is possibly a goal. Obviously mining has the added advantage that it can be quite social, where the other two that I have listed there can be quite antisocial. You don't need to be with other people and can be quite easily done solo. But again, that is obviously an advantage and a disadvantage depending on how you want to play the game. So I know that was short, brief and swift, but that's exactly how I wanted to keep it. And again, I could go into so much detail about every single one. We could be here for hours, and that is not what I want to be doing. And again, I don't think that would necessarily help anybody. This was more of an overview to give you a rough idea of what you can be earning and potential pros and cons for each. Also bear in mind the ISK values here are averages and rough. Again, I don't doubt that somebody could earn more if they have max skills here, there and everywhere, but again, we're talking about relatively newer players, and that's where we want to focus on people that don't have max skills for everything. So I hope that was helpful and useful, and thanks for listening and best of luck.